What should parents look out for when they're looking out for signs and symptoms? We usually have to be very, very careful before we say that there is a problem in the house. For example, for preteens and teens, one of the issues that comes about is they're already having the growth bursts. They're having the growth patterns. So you might think your child is smoking marijuana, but in essence, it is just the body is demanding for more food. So they're cleaning out your fridge on a regular basis, and they need more sleep. It's actually scientifically proven that the older we get, the less sleep we have, and the less sleep we need. Secondly, we also need to be very careful about the things that we have our children accessing to. And we're talking about those two age groups. The amount of information, what they watch, what they do, and what is in your house. So while you're diagnosing and looking at what the problem is, again, use a professional at that particular time. They will be able to diagnose properly what you may have seen or may not have seen. Lastly, we need to use certified professionals to deal with the people. We do not want to get to a point whereby people who are coming into therapy because they have been hurt by other interventions that have been brought about by people who are well-meaning but have actually created more damage for us to deal with. For example, if a person, there are people who use these extreme methods, like there's a parent who I know who picked up his son who had blacked out and paid people in a mortuary so that the son can wake up there. So the son woke up in a mortuary next to dead bodies, and he was told by the mortuary attendants, after everybody pulled the prank of running away and screaming, and him waking up and running away and screaming and saying, "Hey, we found you, we thought you were dead." But here's the thing. Didn't the father add trauma to the son's life? Can the son trust the father again? So when we're thinking about the interventions that we want to help our people with, we need also to think about the repercussions of the things that we do with them. So again, use a trained professional to even do the interventions that you think are needed for your child's or for your loved one's life. One great question that bothers lots of people is addictions age specific? Are more age groups, certain age groups, more vulnerable to addictions? And the question is it true that younger people are more vulnerable to addictions? The answer is there are two specific age groups which are very, very vulnerable to addictions. And the first one is the teens and preteens. This is because their brains are not yet fully developed. So it is easier to deal damage to the brain, to make the brain more addicted to even conduct addictions, even to substance addictions, very, very easily at a younger age because the brain is not fully formed. The chemicals or the activities may impact on the brain so much. And the second group of people are the people who are retirees, people above the age of 60. And here's a kicker. This is because even with all the experience, especially because with all the experience, they think that nothing can happen to them. They have no longer any expectations from society to produce something, or they do not have any societal pressures other than just to relax. We actually insist, go home, buy a farm, go start something else. Remember that this person is starting out into some new venture that they have never ever had. They've never ever thought about. They're not even well prepared for that. So for them, a coping mechanism, a very good one, would be either drink, to get into sexual activities, to get into gambling, as a solution for the angst that they're feeling at that particular time. Again, those two age groups are very, very vulnerable. The older, especially because now even the younger cannot tell them what to do, especially in the African society, we find it very hard to correct our seniors until when they are in very, very bad trouble. And those are the two age groups which are very vulnerable to addictions. Can this problem of addiction be prevented? Yes, it can. For addiction to be prevented, it has to be done in several levels, and we'll start with the personal level. Before you pick up a drug, before you pick up a habit, you need to look into your background. Most people do not know what happened with their forebears. They do not know what their fathers do not know what their mothers do not know their genetic lineage. Yes, it's a lot of information that you need to process before you take your first drink. The same amount of research that we do so that we can find out if we have cancer in our line, in our genetic background, to find out who sometimes our parents are, to find out any information in our past. We should collect that anecdotal evidence even before we pick up the first drink or the first activity, because you may be genetically predisposed for an addiction, either through a mental illness or through genetic markers for addictions. Secondly, and I like what society has done nowadays, we have started to look at mental health. It has become a discussion. So we need to destigmatize any issues around mental health and also addictions completely. And part of the destigmatization is also the legal framework. Right now in my country, Kenya, it is illegal for you to either have attempted suicide, and for most addicts and alcoholics, they will have thought about at least committing suicide. Another part is it is also illegal for us to possess or use some controlled substances because of the law. Now, if this was destigmatized, starting from the legal sector, so that it is easier for people to access help, you can be sentenced to help, can be sentenced to rehab, which is right now being done in an ad hoc basis by all the legal authorities. You can be sentenced to rehab at the discretion of the judge. It is not yet law. So with that, that's a top-down approach. The law has to change so that the people get the help that they need. We also need changes in the education sector. Education sector, and this is what I mean. During the HIV/AIDS pandemic, it was very, when I say during, it's not that it's not going on, but in the 1980s and the 1990s, it was introduced to the school curriculums a unit, a lesson, a whole class about HIV/AIDS and sexual reproductive health. Now, we need to have the same to deal with mental health issues at the appropriate information given to the appropriate age groups at particular times. There's primary school, there is for university, there is for secondary school. The age-appropriate information at all those times. For example, in the universities, they used to, now it's an elective for most universities, but it used to be mandatory for everybody to do an HIV/AIDS unit. Now imagine if there was a mental health unit which was to address issues, basic issues from sexuality, because those are part of the things that bring problems about mental health issues, especially in people who are in campus. Issues from sexuality to recognizing if your friend is in trouble, if you are in trouble also yourself, how to deal with self-care. Self-care meaning, how do you take care of yourself mentally? What is drug addiction? This is what drug addiction does. What are the different types of, different types of mental illnesses out there? That needs to happen as as a educational reform. We all need this information. And lastly, for those who do not know, that the first treatment center in East and Central Africa was put up by the church. The church has been the biggest supporter of treatment in Kenya. But still, within the same church, which is usually the first line of where people will go to ask for help, there is not yet enough information out there up to the grassroots. You will find a church or a mosque or something in every community. So we need to have this information trained into the people that are giving us spiritual services in our communities, so that they can know what to do or who to refer to once they notice these issues are happening in their community. So that's the best prevention that can happen, because by the time somebody is talking to their pastor, things have started to manifest in their homes. And usually when the people are reaching out for help in Kenya, especially, it is too late. Kimeumana. Things are really, really bad. But thank God for organizations like the Bible Society of Kenya. There's also NACADA. Basically, there's enough information getting to the grassroots, but it's not yet where we want it to be. Is there a cure for addictions? Addictions cannot be cured. They can only be stopped in their progression. Just like diabetes, just like asthma, just like things like cancer, you can only say you're in remission. So for people like me who are in addictions recovery, we can only say that we are in recovery. We have not been cured. Because each time we will pick up a drug of choice or that activity of choice, we are in trouble. We go back to where we began. So therefore, addictions is treatable, but cannot be cured. It's a progressive, sometimes terminal chronic disease. So the only way we can do and deal with it is to stop it in its progression and deal with its roots. And we live like that for the rest of our lives without continuing with the activity or drug of choice. What happens in the mind of an addict or an alcoholic? Now, imagine waking up and your body is malfunctioning. You're having severe cravings, you're having severe withdrawals, you're having issues with thinking. The first thought that you would have is, let me get some relief. So let me use something, let me drink something, and once I drink that something or I smoke that something, my mind will start functioning normally. My body will start functioning normally. I can now take breakfast. I can now eat something. So the mind of an addict or an alcoholic, or as politically correct as we can put it, people with substance use disorders, the mind revolves the getting and the using of the chemical substances or the activities that they are psychologically and physically dependent to. And for the layman, this means that your mind is fully geared towards the getting and the using of drugs and alcohol and the activities that you're addicted to. So it's the money to buy the drugs. It is how to get the money to buy the drugs. Is your peddler's phone on? Is a bar open? Did I leave some alcohol in the house? Are there people that I can call right now who have some drugs and alcohol on them? Is a track open today? Can I go and lay down some bets? Are we ready today morning or today afternoon to put on some games? Are there other people on right now on the internet that I can have a game with? Is there a boxing match going on somewhere? Is there a basketball game going on somewhere? Is there a football match going on somewhere? That is how the mind of an addict works. And it's just going on and on and on in an ever-shrinking spiral, going down and down the drain. So it starts out in a much larger span of time. The cycle may take longer, may take a whole week. It continues shrinking over time, up to hours and minutes. You may have drunk the last 3 minutes, but you're thinking about where to get the next drink. And whereas when you started off, you're just thinking about how you're going to get drunk tomorrow, or how you're going to get your next drink next week. So that's what basically happens within the mind of a person who is afflicted. The call to action to most of us that are in problems of addictions is that we know that we're living a life that is not normal. We are living a life that is not productive. Reach out for help. It's the easiest and the hardest thing to do, is to just reach out for help in the right areas. Go to the right people, go to a therapist, go to a rehab center, go to your parents, talk to them, get holistic help. Get everybody's help. Let everybody know so that it no longer becomes a secret. Therefore, you will be held accountable by a large group of people, which will help you along your path of sobriety. Call to action also to the society. Let us normalize the conversation about addictions. Let us normalize the conversation about mental health. Let us normalize everything that we can do to help people in addictions. Let us not normalize laughing at addicts or alcoholics. Let us not normalize the use of drugs and alcohol. Let us not glorify these things, because we may be sending the wrong message to the next generation, telling them that, hey, I smoked weed and it did nothing to me, therefore it shall do nothing to you. Let us also go forward into all sectors and let us change this conversation about mental health. Let us be in a position whereby it is taught not only in the health spaces, it is also taught in the schools, it is also dealt with in the legislature, it is also part of the law. And again, the more noise we make, the faster some certain laws may be put into place. For example, the Kenya Mental Health Act is still pending. And it shall, when it comes to fruition, it shall get so many people access to help. So we need to push and agitate further for that law reform to happen. The law as it is right now is handicapped and has closed so many avenues for help for persons with mental health disorders. And for the society at large and the church, let us get informed. Let us get informed. Let us get informed on the right methods to deal with addictions, right ways to refer to people, also the language that we refer to people with. We have so far learned that the language at which you speak to people with determines how they react to you. So if you see an addict and a person having substance abuse issues, or a person living with a substance use disorder, and you're calling him, "Where mlevi, you're drunk," you're not going to get through to them. But if you treat these people from the language onwards with compassion, you shall be able to get through to them. Therefore, you need much more knowledge. You need much more exposure. Remember, these persons are your children, your brothers, your sisters, your uncles, your fathers, your legislator, and also your boss. Lastly, remember, this is not only a spiritual issue, because persons with addictions confess to having zero spiritual lives. Remember, this is also a social issue. Therefore, if you help one addict, in essence, you're helping about 7 members of society. Everybody from the policeman who's spending at least 35% of his time dealing with drug-related issues. He'll be emptying prisons, because like 50% of the people in prisons confess to having either used drugs or alcohol before commission of their offenses, or you will also have helped the economy by having much more money circulating for much more useful. For you, the viewer, look at your life, evaluate your life before you make your decisions. Each and every action has its own positive or negative consequences.